something interesting happened in the evolution with the emergence of animals. So you see, the immune system is something that works in single-cell organisms and in animals as well. So it's independent from our consciousness or selfhood. It works on its own. But with the emergence of animals and the brain, basically animals, these are biogenic forms that have the capacity to help themselves when they feel the sickness. That sickness could be because of the infection by microbes or because of something else, injuries, etc. But many animal species can help themselves through the process of self-medication. And this is about 400 million year old process. Some animals are actually very good pharmacists. There is a sort of field of animal biology called zoopharmacognosy, the capacity of animals to use plants for self-medication. We'll tell you about that a bit later. So let's start with this picture. Easy to recognize this is an ant, but what is this ant holding? There is something there that looks shiny. It's a round object, and ants have a total of 6 legs. I think this particular ant is using maybe 2 of their legs to hold this object. Would you be able to guess the identity of this object? Obviously, it's not part of its body. It's something taken from the external environment, and by the look of it, it's a kind of transparent, sort of yellowish color, quite shiny. Probably collected somewhere in the environment. This is called a resin. So it is basically excreted by trees. So, and here's a larger picture of this solidified resin. This is something that's excreted by trees. It starts as liquid, but then when it stays longer there, it solidifies. It becomes very hard. And now ants actually collect these. It has been known that ants collect solidified pieces of resin for about 2 centuries. And entomologists actually concluded after sort of many studies in the past that ants, because they live, and here's an example, wood ants. Wood ants these are species of very common ants living all around us. We know that ants are social organisms. They live in nests which are tightly packed, meaning quite a lot of ants living in the small space. And when animals live in a small space, basically there is a risk of, if they're infected, the infection spread fast. And the function of these solidified resin pieces, actually ants collect them and put them in their nests. And scientists, after many studies, concluded that resin pieces contain antimicrobial and antifungal chemicals, and their function, the purpose in the ant nests is to protect them against potential infecting microbes. So this is a kind of equivalent in the case of human medicine. This is called prophylactic medicine. So basically doing something before the infection happens, like using disinfectants, etc. So ants do something similar. These solidified resin pieces serve to perhaps kill microbes before they can infect ants. But ants are actually, let's say, more complex medical expertise. And here's a paper that's published relatively recently, 2016, a study in which scientists actually investigated combinatorial effects of resin and some chemicals. Ants are insects that contain many glands on their bodies. And these glands secrete chemicals like acids, acidic chemicals, including this formic acid. And these chemicals have antimicrobial properties, so they can kill microbes. The similar way that resin by releasing the chemicals, can kill microbes. But the scientists actually found out that ants sometimes spray these resin pieces with the formic acid from their own glands. And this then increases the killing capacity of some pathogenic agents. I think if you look closely at this text box here, fungus, Methesium brunium, ants kill it by combining resin with the formic acid secreted by their own bodies. Resin on its own and this formic acid on its own is not a capable killer of this fungus, but only when combined. And the story with ants does not end there. Ants, as let's call them doctors. Actually, ants have kind of surgical skills, which is pretty cool. But actually, there is quite a lot of evidence for this, for the capacity of ants to produce surgical stitches from the medical literature. And here's a picture, you can watch it on YouTube. One British doctor went to sub-Saharan Africa to find this warrior ant species and consult with native people who use these ants to, whenever they have cuts on their fingers, they would not, or on their body, even big cuts, they wouldn't go to hospital. They would simply go to the forest, find an ant, put it on a place that contains a wound, and the ant would stitch it. And the medical literature shows that ants are surgeons. This is basically an article from Surgical History, published around 10 years ago by a group of, this is a Belgian journal. Ants produce medical or surgical staples. Staples are basically stitches, and you can see this picture here. And this is a wound on, it looks like a skin of an animal because it has quite a lot of hair there. And the ant is getting closer to it, and it will probably stitch that open wound. And, scientists noticed that long time ago, and this particular paper reports, various species of ants that can do that. And here basically is a larger picture. You can see that these ants have very powerful claws that they can sort of put on the edges of the wound and stitch and produce a staple, something that surgeons do for a living. And there are many examples of animal self-medication. I don't want to go into details of this, but if you read my book, you will find that animals like bears, deer, elk, various apes, lizards, baboons, fruit flies, even woolly spider monkeys in Brazil, pregnant elephants in Kenya eat the leaves of some trees to induce delivery, etc. So basically, the process of this self-medication mostly involves the use of plants. So animals know how to select and which plant to select to treat the ailment or disease they're facing. And scientists established 4 criteria for these medicinal plants to be called animal self-medicating plants. So these plants must not be used, they must not be the part of the animal regular diet. You can see here a cat basically selecting one of the plants. Self-medicating plants must lack nutritional value. The use must be the highest, the frequency at the time when, the frequency of the infection is the highest. And unaffected animals, in other words, healthy animals, must not use these. So these are criteria that scientists investigating self-medication established to really prove the existence of this self-medication. And this last part is about the origins of human medicine. So we started with the concept of that medicine can be naturalized. We started with the modern human medicine, how complicated and complex it is, really quite a sophisticated way of helping our bodies, science, various projects, etc. But the roots of human medicine, as I said at the beginning, are in these roots are naturalist roots, so perhaps in first cells like bacteria, and we talked about bacterial immunity, then about animals and animal self-medication. So perhaps the roots of human medicine are in sort of, it's a combination of things, perhaps self-medication in our, when I say hominin relatives, these are species that are close to us, like chimps, etc., orangutans. Also sharing information between groups. And here is the, when I say groups sharing the information that, say, native people had 50,000 years ago with another group of hominins like Neanderthals who lived then. Now we know that there are no, Neanderthals died as a species, or perhaps looking at what the other animals do when they get sick. So this is, a very, very long process that lasted for thousands of years and until eventually the modern medicine emerged.